Okay, so guys, we're just going to do a very quick episode of the PiG Daily today. And we are going to be looking at a replay of Snute versus PtitDrogo. The Snooter versus the Little Dragon. And this replay, what we're really looking at is a unique way of playing playing these maps with destructible rocks. It's going to be a map on Ruins of Endion. And yeah, let's turn the music on. That in-game music is beautiful. So basically, there's destructible rocks that actually cut off the only avenue towards your opponent. Only other paths on this map are also blocked by rocks. And there's these on both sides. And I feel like no one's really done a video just talking about how to use those. And there are multiple ways. One of the biggest things that those limit is if you take those rocks down is it's very hard for your opponent to rush you. Now, if you take down your opponent's rocks, and then your rocks as well, it's like doubly as hard because you've got two sets of rocks to get through to attack each other. So generally players want to kind of play a bit greedier than normal. They want to say, well, you can't all in me very easily. So I'm just gonna, you know, play a bit greedier. The question is, how do you stay safe? Basically, you need to ensure you can take those rocks down in time. So the first thing that Snoot's going to do here is he's going to open up with a 17 pool build, knowing that this is going to both afford him the ability to get out very early Zerglings to break down any rocks. Let's throw our production tab up. And even though he's getting blocked here, it doesn't really matter. You'll see, yeah, he's got 500 minerals, but that's fine. He'll be able to build Zerglings and a queen, and those pylon blocks are actually costing Drogo a lot of money. So as long as you do go a pool first, or you send a drone down ahead of time on a two-player map, you see a probe coming in, you can just always drop a pool first. As long as it's down pretty much on time, you build 4 Zerglings the moment it finishes, you're going to be able to clear those pylons out and end up in a very good position. Usually slightly ahead of your opponent if you don't make any mistakes. The main reason people struggle against this is they panic when their hatcheries get blocked. They don't know how to react, they forget to build overlords, or then they spend all their lava on drones. They then can't build any Zerglings once the spawning pool finishes, and the pylon block goes on and on and on. If your opponent were also to build, say, gateways and cybernetics cores here, like the super blocks, what you'd do is you'd actually just, you'd basically just put down a hatchery. There's like a cyber core here. You'd put down a hatchery there, and once you've cleared it out, you'd put down a hatchery, because they'd be delaying what they're doing so much that you can actually afford to go up to 4 hatcheries. As crazy as that sounds, you can actually afford that. Anyway, back to the point of the map. Snoot's game plan wasn't necessarily to deal with early pylons, it was basically just to go pool, hatch, hatch. Now, how is he being greedy this game? Well, this seems a lot safer than a hatch first build, a lot of people would say. Keep in mind, he's skipping gas. He's cutting that gas because he knows he doesn't need Zergling speed, he doesn't need fast roaches, because he can take these rocks down. So, because his Zerglings got held up, he's going straight for his own rocks. However, if there wasn't any delay on his Zerglings having to clear that out, there's a good chance he might have gone over to the other side of the map and tried to take down Drogo's rocks first. As it is, he just does focus on his own rocks and then start clearing out this 4th base here in the pocket, just being very economical, very much defensively focused. Keep in mind, he's got to take those rocks down early. You can't go hatch first and then build those Zerglings. The reason why you can't do that is, well, you've got slow Zerglings, you're skipping gas. What if a Reaper comes over in ZvP? A Reaper can out-micro Slowlings forever, and then if you don't get those rocks down and Hellions arrive, you don't have any Zergling speed, oh shit, you're friggin' dead, man. You're going to take so much harassment damage. Likewise with Adepts. If an Adept gets there before those rocks are down, your Zerglings can't do a lot about it. The Adepts can really out-micro the Slowlings off creep. So definitely something where you want to just make sure you take those rocks down and play super efficiently. So the plan here from Snoot from the start was to go pool, hatch, hatch. And that is what he did. And only now later on adding gases, and he's actually adding them very late. 3 minutes 40 is when he put down double gas, his first 2 gases. And what's this allowed him to do? It's allowed him to focus just on drones. And this is something which, as all races you can make use of on this map, is really just focusing on pumping up that 3 base economy as quickly as possible and getting to an absolutely insane drone count. Notice that Snoot's coming in here, and he doesn't really know what's going on, but he's saying, well, I can afford to put down a safety Spore Crawler at my 3rd, because a Stargate could be proxied up here somewhere. And it looks like, oh my god, it's the only Spore Crawler he builds, and it ends up being perfect. He anticipates the Oracle coming in. Does put down a few more spores. The Oracle, not knowing that there's no spores in those bases, is just going to try and pick up 1 or 2 exposed drones. But that of course is some next level. I'm Snute and I kind of know what sort of builds Drogo is capable of and what's popular in the European meta on this map. The important thing though is look at this. Yeah, the lair's not insanely fast. It's still a well-timed lair. He's gone for that with his first 100 gas, still skipping the Zergling speed and now going for his evolution chamber. And his extra gases only going down once the mineral lines are saturated. So this is like the most efficient 3 base play he could possibly do. His base is just getting oversaturated in time to pull drones off minerals onto gas. So he almost never dips underneath that 3 base saturation point. And because he's been so economical, and because he's not playing against Phoenixes, he knows he's seen an Oracle opening, he says, I'm going to go straight for that Spire. I'm not necessarily going to use it if it gets scouted, if Drogo builds a few Phoenixes, we don't need to use it, but even forcing that response is really powerful. So this is a really good way to play for Snute. Let's turn the music volume down a little bit, that's a bit noisy, as much as I love the music. But yeah, basically he's just saying to himself, he's like, you know what, if you don't happen to go Phoenixes, you don't spot this, I just build like 15 Mutalisks and I just, you know, go crazy with it. It looks like he's not going to bank for that option. He's just saying, look, it's Drogo, he's going to scout pretty well. We'll just get Hydras, head straight for that Lurker Den before even getting the Hydra upgrade. Very popular on this map because you can break down these rocks and push into the Protoss 4th base super early on. Also going for a nicely timed 4th base, and notice taking the gases even before the 4th base finishes. So really what we're seeing here is just the general rule you want to follow. Whatever your race, whatever your situation, if you are playing one of these rock maps, you can either play super all in. So imagine you're playing against Snute here. You could say, look, if I'm playing against someone who I think is going to be extra greedy, they can delay their gases, skip Zergling speed, I'm just going to do a super big all in, and even if I've got to break down 2 pairs of rocks, because they're not prepared for it, because they're being extra greedy, I think it's still got a chance of working. But it becomes so much more all in because of those delays we were talking about. So you've got to always weigh it up. And this is one of the big criticisms of these rock tower maps as well, is it kind of increases randomness. You know, it makes it harder to scout, it makes poking and harassment a lot more all in, because you can't just run across the map with some speedlings and poke around. You've got to knock down 4,000 hit points of rocks first. But that's what you've got to take into account, is yes, maybe it's a little bit more gambly, but you yourself as a player, the most solid way is probably to play this defensive style. It's to say, okay, let's just play a bit more greedy than normal, try to still do all our regular scouting, whether it be with Overlord, Speed, Overseers, anything like that, and then once we get to this point, just power on up and play out the matchup however you normally would. So Snute's done a fantastic job. Let's actually check when he first hit 3 base saturation, just to give you guys an idea, so you can compare this in your own games. Because I think it's going to be about 5 minutes 30, maybe even, oh my god, he's at 64 drones at 5 minutes 15. So these gases are already all down. 6 gases down, most of his tech's down, and he's at 64 drones. So by 5 minutes 30, he is completely saturated. He's just adding his last few drones. So about 5 minutes 30, completely saturated on 3 bases, and a 4th base on the way. So absolutely stellar macro out of Snute. So that's a really good benchmark. You can say in a game, if I'm being mega greedy, I'm not really getting any of those early defensive tools, such as Zergling speed, that's the friggin' timing I want, man. 5 minutes 30, 66 drones, which is absolutely beautiful. So from there, we're just going to be looking at a pretty standard ZvP plan for a map which has a good lurker push positioning. On other maps, Dusk Towers especially is a map where lurkers are falling out of fashion because Zerg players are finding it's very easy for the Protoss to flank the lurker push, come in from multiple angles, therefore minimizing the splash damage and crush it. They also find it very hard to push in between the Protoss expansions, which is the other way you can make lurkers effective, is if you push at a really sharp timing, get in between their bases, and force them to attack into a sort of awkward spot. Alright, so we're getting back up to where we were. So in this case, we're going to be seeing that lurker push. We've seen it in DreamHack over the weekend. Break down these rocks, get up here, push into that 4th base, because this 4th up here is so easy to cancel with just Hydra, Zergling, any mobile units. So we see Snute, he's just beeline towards this. He's got double upgrades going, so +2 range, +1 carapace, and he wants to hit right around the time both of those finish. He's got Hydra range on the way, He's already got the Lurker Den finished, but he doesn't have that much gas yet. He could start making Lurkers, and he no doubt will quite soon. But he feels confident that he can defend this area because he's been so efficient early on. Because he defended the early Oracle pressure, he didn't really take any damage. Because he shut down that Warp Prism with just 3 Mutalisks. What a cute little number of Mutalisks to build just to shut down Warp Prisms. So he really wanted to be able to just focus on this one frontal area. He wanted to take away Drogo's ability to pull his attention away. And that's going to work out very well. So at the end, how much does Snute drone? We see he's transitioned a few workers out of his main. He does have about 8 or 9 drones on the 4th base as well as the gases. So about 75 drones, and that's usually the sweet spot. You don't really want any more drones than that in ZvP unless you're playing some crazy hive tech style, which at the highest level, players just don't do because they know that if they let the Protoss get up Storm, Tempest, and they give them time to get all those things, it's really hard to break them. So most of the time Zerg players, the sweet spot in ZvP is about 75 drones, which is just a few drones on your 4th base. Most of the drones mining the minerals will be transitioned from your main and natural, and just the extra drones on the gas. So we're going to see Snute now. He's just going to push in here, moving his lurkers up. Ling Hydra lurker here, and he's just going to edge his way into this base and try to force Drogo to fight in a bad position. Notice he completely skipped the Roachmoran, completely skipped the Baneling Nest. He's just putting every bit of gas into Hydras and Lurkers, almost pure Lurker at this point because there aren't really any air units, and just using the Zerglings as a bit of a buffer. And whenever the engagements happen, the Hydralisks want to be standing directly on top of the Lurkers, not too far in front where they're exposed, not behind where the Lurkers are exposed, just right on top of the Lurkers, so that the damage is so compact. So he's just waiting with his units. The moment Drogo comes forward, he's going to try and do that. Notice, here we go. He doesn't want his Hydras any further forward than that. There is some nice storms coming down all over his army, so he does have to dodge those, but immediately after that, he's going to try and get back right on top of those Lurkers. We see him A-moving his way back forward. And the Lurker splash damage, whenever you force your opponent to engage in this confined choke point type area, we see there's just a little bit too much, a little bit overwhelming. The 2-1 upgrades have finished. And we see that Snute here just played a very simple game plan. Just be really economic in the opening, use those rocks for safety. He had a good bit of foresight with defending the Oracle pressure. Of course, I would definitely advise a lower level player who hasn't really scouted anything, isn't sure what's coming, to put down 2 or 3 Spore Crawlers rather than just the 1, which Snute did. But yeah, he just absolutely crushes here. Drogo can't really do anything. He can't get out the units he needs. If he could somehow have a flank in that engage on that ramp, then suddenly everything would have looked totally different. But as it is, very nice play out of Snute. So keep in mind, this could have played out very differently. If we look back very quickly, I want to look at this from the Protoss perspective. And keep in mind, Drogo is basically following the exact same mentality as Snute. And most Protoss players will do this on this map. It makes sense, right? Protoss is a race which struggles to take their 3rd. Not here on Endion, where he just immediately goes out with his Mothership Core. Actually, he's already taken them down now. The moment his Mothership Core comes out, which he builds the second his Cyber Core is done, it just goes straight down to those rocks along with an early Zealot. Normally you'd skip a Zealot, but it's the same reason Snute goes for pull first and gets those Zerglings out. He wants to be sure he can take these rocks down before Zergling speed hits, before anything crazy comes his way. Notice that Drogo, he just kind of probed, scouted early, denied the expansions. He thought, okay, you know, there could be a gas fill up. He scouted no gas, and he said, oh yeah, I'm completely fine. I can play as greedy as I want. Snute on the other side of things, doing the same thing. So we see Drogo's basically saying, look, an Oracle's my only pressure. Other than that, it's just non-stop probes. He will add another gateway or 2, just so he has a little bit more production. But that Oracle's going to both scout to check there's no all-in coming. Check there isn't just a random Roachling bust coming through these rocks to overwhelm him. Because then, of course, he would build a Void Ray. Check there isn't some sort of Nidus Worm. Check that the 3rd has actually gone down, the 3rd is droning. So Drogo comes in, and we really do see the same game plan out of both players. It's just that Drogo didn't really have a way to defend that Lurker Hydra push. And also his Oracle here didn't get quite as much damage done as he would have liked. So I think this is a really smart way for both players to play, because like I said, you can't really play a middle of the road pressure build on this map. Why? Those rocks, they just block all of that normal interaction. So you can still do light air harassment. Something like an Oracle is really smart because it can still harass, it can make sure the opponent's being safe. Phoenix is another great option. If your opponent doesn't build anti-air, then Mutas is a great option, which is of course why we do see Snute go for such a fast Spire up here. But it's always about taking into account the reduced interaction between each other because of the rocks. And how do we take advantage of that? We take advantage of that by being extra greedy. We see here, double Robo already down at 5 minutes. They finished at 5:40, starting up really early double Immortal production, just diving into the Immortal Storm charge lot composition is Drogo. So let's check the worker count. Before we were like, oh my god, 5 minutes 30. Snute was fully saturated on 3 base. Check it out, just after 6 minutes, Drogo is hitting that same saturation point himself. At about 6 minutes 20, Drogo is hitting 67 probes and already looking to take down these rocks so he can secure a fast fourth. So Drogo also doing a spectacular job in this regard. Now, here's one of the biggest wins we do see for Snute in the intelligence and how he plays it. Check this out. Double Stargate. Going down on top of the other Stargate, which is building Phoenixes. Now, Phoenixes early on are an amazing unit. They do harassment damage, and most importantly, they're picking away at your opponent from very early on. But if you force Phoenixes out in the mid to late game, by that point there's usually already anti-air up. There's lots of mobile anti-air units flying around, so the Phoenixes don't have an opportunity to do as much harassment damage. Now, if they're really on top of it, the Phoenixes can still find some drones. But you pick up 4 or 5 drones off a 78 drone economy, that's nothing. That is so inconsequential. Whereas if you pick off that same number of drones off a 30, 40, or 50 drone economy, it's a much bigger percentage. So we see that just forcing this huge extra investment, 4 Phoenixes, you might think, oh, that's not that many. He's seen just a few Mutas, and he's chased them off with just his 4 Phoenix, that's fine. 3 Stargates, man. That is 450 minerals, 450 gas. Each Phoenix is another 100 gas and 150 minerals. So that's like 1,000 gas. That could be a lot of Archons, a lot of Storm already finished, all sorts of things. So simply the threat of that Spire has actually done an incredibly good job at just kind of forcing out a huge wasted investment from Drogo. And I think that's really what gives Snute the edge here. I do feel like even though Lurkers are very powerful here, if Protoss has just enough Immortals, Storm, Archons, they can still crash through that. It's mainly the small units like the Charge Lots, the Sentries, that just aren't going to be worth their cost in this choked up area. But the units, the Immortals, the Archons, especially the Storm, that's going to be so useful. So it's definitely something where those Phoenixes, those Stargates, huge waste of income. We see Drogo here starts taking this fourth, puts down a cannon, but look at his army, it's just still so small. And partly, I guess, look, he's got Chrono Boost still down on the Stargate, something even the best Protoss players are not good with their Chrono Boost these days. It's really actually hard to keep it up, being on the structure that you're using all the time. And it's not even that big a boost either way. But we see here, you know, he's getting Templar, he's going double Immortal, he's adding Charge Lots. But he's very unsure about exactly which path is Snute heading. He's thinking to himself, you know, is he going Hive behind this? Is it just Lurkers? I know he's got some Hydras, I gotta prepare for that. But he's just doesn't quite have that ball of Immortal Archon up yet. He just spent way too much money on these Phoenixes. He actually built even extra of them. And what have they done? They've killed a couple drones. That's not what matters right now. What matters is an army which will help in the engagement. And these Phoenixes, while they can help with lifting up some units, they're not going to help a large amount. They're only going to do a very small amount of useful aid. So a few hiccups in the Immortal production for Drogo. Unfortunately, overreacting. And I think he kind of had to at least overreact a little bit. But I think the third Stargate especially was unnecessary, and I think adding the extra Phoenix also unnecessary. I think he should have just stayed on 4 Phoenix. He does come in here, and I mean, some brilliant storms. He spreads perfectly to come from here and here, but he just doesn't quite have enough meat in this army, and that positioning, as we said, is rather brutal. Also, the Phoenix is coming in a bit late. Definitely not the best execution out of Drogo. I'm sure he would be much harsher if he was watching this game himself. He'd be like, actually, I did that really bad. But I think we're definitely picking up on the key points. And all in all, the opening out of Drogo was still super pristine, very economical, very fast probing, both players making use of the rocks. So I think we've done a pretty good tutorial here, just in terms of looking at a game, not a tutorial, but an analysis of how players at the top are using this map in a defensive way, and how to take advantage of a map where early game interaction is limited, where you can't necessarily get your normal harassment and all that sort of stuff. So I think that was you know, a pretty interesting game. It's something we should all think about. We might try and find some good core hole carnage games. Unfortunately, they're almost always vetoed in tournaments, and we can look at some of those as well. So thanks for watching, guys. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube, and we'll keep it up. Thank you.